For decades, the US and Canada border symbolized stability, two nations linked by trust, commerce, and seamless mobility. But in 2025, the signals are different. Policies are shifting, procedures are tightening, and the perception of welcome is eroding. Canadians who once crossed with ease now encounter scrutiny, delays, and a system quietly recalibrating its stance. The implications go far beyond tourism. They touch security, politics, and the very architecture of mobility in North America. Subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what you were seeing on the ground, so you stay a step ahead. The global landscape of travel is transforming at a pace few anticipated. Rising nationalism, technological borders, and competing security doctrines are redrawing mobility frameworks worldwide. Canada and the US, once a showcase of cross-border openness, now reflect this new reality. Friction is increasing not because of open hostility, but because of systemic recalibration. Each shift seems minor in isolation, but together they signal a departure from decades of automatic trust. Economic and security pressures intersect. Washington faces demands to strengthen border resilience, manage migration pressures, and ensure surveillance capability over long-term foreign visitors. Ottawa, meanwhile, confronts the reality that its closest partner now subjects its citizens to levels of vetting once reserved for higher-risk regions. The bilateral framework is not collapsing, but it is evolving in ways Canadians did not anticipate. This adjustment is not confined to North America. Around the globe, borders once fluid are constricting. Europe debates the rollback of Schengen freedoms. Asian powers impose stricter electronic travel authorizations. Africa experiments with digital visas but ties them to biometric tracking. In each case, the stated rationale is security. The underlying driver, however, is control. For Canadians, the timing is critical. The world is entering an era where mobility is no longer assumed. It is managed. Being a low-risk traveler group is no longer a guarantee of seamless access. The quiet message at the border is unmistakable. Compliance is mandatory, surveillance is expanding, and even traditional allies are not exempt. The broader context suggests a structural shift. Borders are becoming less about geography and more about data. Crossing lines on a map now means surrendering information, submitting to surveillance, and accepting asymmetry in rights. Canada's relationship with the US is not deteriorating by confrontation, but by incremental restriction, a trend that is easy to miss until the cumulative weight becomes clear. Passports and visas are at the front line of this shift. Canadians have long benefited from visa-free entry to the US, but 2025 introduces subtle constraints. Electronic registrations now apply to longer stays, quietly replacing old norms of open movement. These new requirements do not block access outright, but they add a layer of bureaucracy that erodes the sense of privileged entry. The silent collapse of exemptions is notable. Where once Canadians assumed 6 months of access, they now confront a 30-day registration threshold. The change appears technical, but the intent is clear. Washington wants visibility over duration, activity, and intent. The perception of automatic trust is giving way to conditional permission. This erosion is not unique to North America. Across Europe, visa waivers are being reevaluated. Electronic travel authorizations, often presented as streamlined conveniences, double as data gathering tools. Once a government knows when you arrive, how long you stay, and what you declare, your mobility is no longer yours alone. Canadians also face the risk of revocation. Unlike formal visa denials, silent cancellations, or unexplained rejections now occur with increasing frequency. The logic is preventive rather than punitive, but the result is destabilizing. A border once navigated with predictability now feels conditional on shifting rules. The system is calibrated for flexibility on the government side and rigidity on the traveler side. Canadians may comply perfectly, but a technical error, outdated database entry, or officer discretion can alter their status instantly. Once recorded, these changes are almost impossible to contest. Mobility is no longer a right of proximity. It is a privilege administered by evolving systems. Security and surveillance now shape the experience of crossing. Devices once considered private are open to inspection without warrant. Phones, laptops, and digital accounts are scanned not for immediate threats, but for patterns, affiliations, and anomalies. The line between border control and intelligence collection is blurring. Artificial intelligence amplifies this trend. Automated systems now evaluate risk profiles before a traveler even arrives at the booth. Algorithms flag inconsistencies in travel history, financial records, or online presence. Canadians are discovering that harmless digital footprints, social posts, private messages, even stored photos can trigger additional scrutiny. The risk is asymmetry. Border agencies have the right to collect, analyze, and act on data without transparency. Travelers, meanwhile, have little recourse if information is misinterpreted or context ignored. A joke online, a political opinion, or an old association can acquire unintended weight when processed by machines designed to detect risk. The Canadian government issues advisories, but these rarely alter U.S. practices. Ottawa can warn its citizens to wipe devices or limit personal data, but the balance of power remains with U.S. agents. Canadians are learning that the world's longest undefended border is no longer a matter of trust. It is a checkpoint tied to global surveillance frameworks. This shift reflects a wider strategic logic. Borders are evolving into intelligence frontlines. Every traveler is both a subject of inspection and a potential data point in vast systems of monitoring. Canadians are not exempt. They are simply experiencing what many travelers from other regions have long accepted as standard practice. Perceptions now vary depending on nationality, and Canadians are beginning to understand that their passport no longer guarantees uniform treatment. Historically, being Canadian at a U.S. border carried implicit goodwill. In 2025, that goodwill appears conditional, segmented by background, appearance, and digital trace. Americans once viewed Canadians as indistinguishable from themselves in terms of mobility. Recent surveys, however, show a decline in the perception of Canada as an unquestioned ally. This shift translates into subtle but real differences in how Canadian travelers are processed. Trust has not disappeared, but it is no longer universal. Contrast is evident when compared to other regions. Europeans face stringent electronic authorizations but retain strong political backing that moderates border behavior. Asians encounter meticulous scrutiny but are accustomed to navigating bureaucratic systems. For Canadians, the change is disorienting precisely because it breaks with a tradition of ease. Travelers of Middle Eastern or South Asian heritage, even with Canadian passports, report deeper questioning and prolonged inspections. These cases rarely make headlines, but the patterns are consistent. The nationality on paper no longer defines the experience at the border. Perceived risk categories do. The US and Canada relationship is not collapsing, but it is stratifying. Canadians are learning that their treatment is influenced not just by nationality, but by variables beyond their control. This introduces a new layer of uncertainty into cross-border movement, reshaping both perception and practice. The risks are tangible. Detentions, deportations, and bans are no longer rare anomalies. They are operational realities. Canadians can comply fully with regulations and still be denied entry without explanation. The absence of appeal amplifies the risk, as decisions are final and records permanent. For travelers, the danger lies in minor errors. Misstated itineraries, ambiguous plans, or incomplete forms can escalate quickly. What once resulted in clarification now triggers suspicion. The margin for error has narrowed, and even small mistakes can lead to disproportionate consequences. The psychological effect is significant. Canadians accustomed to seamless entry now travel with hesitation. Families reconsider road trips. Academics decline conferences. Businesses weigh alternative markets. Each decision compounds into a broader retreat from what was once the most natural cross-border flow in the world. Legal professionals confirm the trend. Cases of unexplained bans, extended detentions, and reputational damage are rising. Once flagged, travelers struggle to clear their status. The system's opacity ensures that corrective action is rare. In effect, a single misstep can define a traveler's relationship with the border indefinitely. This is not solely about policy enforcement. It reflects a strategic recalibration, prioritizing control and risk management over the historic narrative of shared openness. Canadians now face the reality that the border is no longer a gateway of trust. It is a filter of suspicion. Looking ahead, the scenarios are stark. In the short term, expect further digitalization of entry requirements. Registration systems will expand, biometric databases will grow, and border automation will deepen. Canadians will face more checkpoints embedded in online forms long before they reach a physical crossing. Medium-term projections point to stratification of mobility. Travelers deemed low risk will retain access, but only under constant surveillance. Those flagged by algorithms or officer discretion will face enduring barriers, often without knowing why. The system will increasingly resemble a tiered architecture where trust is provisional and revocable. The US and Canada relationship itself may shift into a more formalized arrangement. Agreements that once rested on mutual trust may evolve into codified frameworks emphasizing compliance, data sharing, and monitoring. Ottawa will seek to negotiate, but leverage lies disproportionately in Washington's hands. For Canadians, the implications extend beyond tourism. Academic exchange, business travel, and family ties will all be affected. The cumulative effect is a narrowing of opportunities, particularly for communities already subject to heightened scrutiny. What was once a predictable corridor of movement may become a calculated risk. Strategically, this is not isolation, but transformation. Borders are not closing. They are digitizing, stratifying, and institutionalizing memory. The practical outcome is a future where Canadians cross less often, less freely, and with more caution, altering not just mobility, but the bilateral relationship itself. The US and Canada border is not closing, but it is evolving into something fundamentally different. Canadians once assumed seamless access. Today, they confront surveillance, restrictions, and the risk of silent exclusion. These are not isolated inconveniences. They are indicators of a strategic shift in how mobility is controlled. The lesson is clear. In 2025, the welcome mat is conditional, and Canadians must adapt to a border that no longer forgets. Stay informed. Stay ahead. Subscribe now and join the conversation below.